mentioned Rochester, and I was fascinated by this. So they built the inner loop, and decades later, with help from the Obama administration's Tiger Grant, it sank 18 feet below ground. One thing that has been advocated for in this book is highway removal, which seems, and look, this is my first dabble in understanding roads. I was like, huh? You're going to remove highways? How are you going to do it? And then reading on, it's like, oh, this actually makes sense. So what did you learn about Rochester? What is the history, and what have been the effects of highway removal in that town?
Yeah, so Rochester is just kind of a classic example of an American city that surrounded its downtown with a highway. Almost every American city did this, but they were one of the first to. So they built what's called the Inner Loop Highway in the 1950s. It was this sunken highway that circled their downtown, and it was very much a way sold as a way to kind of revitalize what was a struggling downtown. And it had the opposite effect. People got on that highway and they drove home to the suburbs and they didn't come back.
Hmm.
So, fast forward 50 years, 60 years, Rochester is a declining town, population is declining, downtown population is declining, and city leaders are really looking for a revitalization project. And someone floats the idea of like, hey, people don't drive on this inner loop as much as they used to, as much as it was designed for. Like, what if we just got rid of it? What if we use that land for something else? And so in 2017, the Obama administration gave the city of Rochester a grant to do just that. So they basically filled in this kind of moat circling downtown. They brought, it was a sunken highway, and they brought it up to grade and, filled in that land. And then suddenly the city of Rochester, had 8 or 10 acres of land to like do something with. And what they did is they parceled it off and sold it to developers who built affordable apartments on that land. And it's really remarkable to go to Rochester because they've done half of their inner loop and they're currently in the process of doing the second half, the inner loop north. The first project was the inner loop east. And you can go and you can walk around their downtown and like go look at the inner loop north, which is still a sunken highway, still has cars on it. And then just walk like a couple blocks south and you're in this like the neighborhoods are congruent. They just float into one another. There are people living on land that used to be a highway. There's 4-story apartment buildings. Most of them are rented to people earning below the median income. And I talk to people who live in those apartments, and like a lot of people already have forgotten that a highway was ever there. Like it's very easy to walk in that neighborhood and sort of forget that there was ever a highway. And that happened over 6 years, 8 years. And what that showed me is like, it is very possible to reimagine and rebuild our cities. Like we absolutely transformed them in the 1950s when we built all these highways. Like we could take them down and build something different in their place. And like, almost every city in America has a housing crisis. Like we need more housing in most cities. And like, where could we put it? Land is the largest constraining factor in most places. Well, let's look at all of the land that our cars occupy. Like, are we saying that cars are the highest value versus like housing units for people? And I think that's like what Rochester shows with lots of cities that have torn down highways is that that land is an incredibly valuable asset, and there's an opportunity cost to giving it to cars.
Here's my follow-up, and I know we touched on this moments ago, but is it lobbying that does this? What have you found for the main reason why some who are lawmakers will go against building affordable housing and will stick with the road scenario?
Lobbying is definitely one reason. I mean, there's a classic story of political corruption. Car companies give a lot of money to lawmakers. Oil companies give a lot of money to lawmakers, particularly in Texas. So, the contractors that build highways, they have an enormous and very muscular lobby that influences state lawmakers in particular. And a lot of these decisions happen at the state level. The federal government is essentially just the bank for highway building. State DOTs make these decisions, and state DOTs answer to state lawmakers. And indeed, in lots of states, lawmakers are handsomely donated by, all these industries I just mentioned. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
is certainly part of it. But I think, like I said, until recently, like, even governors, for example, who had committed to ambitious climate goals were still widening highways,
Mm-hmm.
despite transportation being the country's largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. There seemed to be this sort of disconnect between like values and the values enacted by our transportation system. I think that is beginning to change. Um, But, in Republican-led states like Texas, a lot of Republican leaders, like we talked about at the beginning, like cars are prosperity. Cars create prosperity, cars create economic development for these leaders. And so any project that would remove car capacity threatens economic development.